Hi. It's hard to believe that this is the last time I'm going to upload some content for this class. I'm going to miss our Tuesday morning conversations. For today, I'd like to, first of all, start the slideshow. There we go. But for today, I'd like to take a few minutes and talk about the Imago Day and how we can think through God in ways that create meaningful connection for people with disabilities. So, first of all, the Imago Dei, for those who aren't familiar, is Latin, and it's simply the image of God. That's what it means. It's a term to describe the uniqueness of humankind as God's creation. And while scholars and theologians differ, it's usually understood that it goes beyond physical likeness, though some emphasize that, to include qualities such as will, reason, our emotions, and our social connectedness or our sense of relationship. There are three direct references to the image of God made in Genesis. There's the story of the creation of the world, there's the creation of Adam, and then there's the story of the flood and Noah. And you can look up those references if you'd like. Perhaps we'll have a chance to talk about them in class. I have uploaded one of them, a recitation by an assortment of people with disabilities, onto my learning space, and I just enjoy it. So I hope you do too. Um, so a few things. Historically, the Imago Dei was associated with a physical resemblance to God. Some scholars emphasized the fact that humankind was created to physically resemble God in his likeness, if you're using the traditional language, though many now resist the use of the masculine language, and others may uh, conceptualize the Imago Dei in many other ways. There are wonderful representations of God as a racialized minority, as a person with a disability, as queer, and so on. There are some really wonderful representations of God and Jesus, and I would encourage you maybe to go and take a look. But ultimately, historically, God was seen to physically resemble usually a man, and a dominion over other creatures, so a sense of power. And God was defined as rational. And sorry, the Imago Dei, people made in God's likeness, were seen as rational, so therefore like God that way, and that they had a sense of spirituality. So this is why some people believe that animals are not Imago Dei. Historically, if we were to look at a couple of key historians and philosophers, Aquinas believed that we needed to have the intellectual capacity to properly understand God, to image God, um, and we must know and love God, and that was strongly emphasized. We must have some cognitive capacity to understand God. Augustine focused on the three faculties of the soul, and these once again included things like the intellect, memory, and will. John Calvin saw this as more of an ensouled relational experience rather than rationality, but there was still a sense of obedience. One needed to understand the call of God and then to follow God, and so it was very action based. All of these have some real cognitive capacity associated with being Imago Dei, which someone like me who explores intellectual disability and spirituality has great difficulty with. So you can probably see some problems here. Imago Dei, or being created in the likeness of God, is often associated with qualities like being white, or being a member of the dominant culture, male usually, and able bodied. God is associated with power and intelligence and qualities that are most valued by a particular society. For this week, you're going to be introduced to two different ways to think through God. The first is Eastland's work on the disabled God. Eastland has been discussed off and on by various guests over the class, so next time maybe I need to introduce her work a little earlier in the course, but you'll get to read it for this week. But she talks about God in a wheelchair, and offers disabled images of God. She talks about Jesus, as being, when he is crucified on the cross, as being embodied in a very broken and disabled way, which makes it possible to look at the divine in a different form of embodiment, in an injured or disabled embodiment, and in a way that doesn't connect um, an injured body or an embodiment that veers from typical, with disability, or in terms of not having a connection with the divine. So many people find these very helpful images of God. The limits, of course, of Eastland's model is that she still doesn't really explore cognitive disability. Um, it also creates problems for people who may have ambivalent or negative feelings around their disability. And we know, I like to think by this point in the course, we really understand that the experience of disability is unique to every person. There's that wonderful saying that if you've met someone with autism, or if you know someone with autism, you know one person with autism. The experience of autism is so diverse, similar disability. So while some people have strongly identify with their embodiment as disabled, so think back to Stella and her experience with disability, some may not have those feelings. Some people, perhaps who have acquired disability later in life, may be struggling with a sense of loss with regard to their embodiment, and may be working through different feelings around embodiment. So these open up some problematic aspects of the disabled God. Reynolds, who you're also going to read this week, talks about the Imago Dei really in with regard to relationality, and he talks about it with respect to creativity, availability, so availability to enter into relationships, to give and receive love, to be connected with each other, and with creation, and for being open and responsible for this experience. Many, though, have argued that, well, Tom, by like the sorry, I know Tom. So Reynolds, well, he connects the Imago Dei through a relationship experience, and he himself has experienced parenting a child with who is not neurotypical. He still has an element of cognitive capacity, so cognitive ability to his sense of the Imago Dei. So there's some limits even to his. So we still need to think through what about being created in the image of God, where we move away from cognitive capacity. That's an area that hasn't been well explored. But all of these authors, specifically Reynolds and Eastland, and there are others, start to really challenge this idea of God as powerful and relational and so on, and able-bodied, and open up new and interesting ways to conceive of God and the divine, but also what it is to be created in the image of God for people who have diverse embodiment. Anyway, I'll look forward to unpacking this together in our final class on Tuesday, and I hope you have a great weekend. Take care.